Okay, so in the interest of time, I think we should go ahead and get started. I'll let people in as they enter the waiting room. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we're going to talk with two professors at two different universities that use environmental education as a way of teaching their students, both in pre-service classes as well as pre-professional classes. So thank you for coming. And with that, I'm going to introduce our two guest speakers today. Well, I should also introduce myself. My name is Elena Takaki, and I'm the Director of Professional Development and Conservation Education at the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. You may be familiar with one of our more popular curriculum guides called Project Wild. And so we're super interested in how folks are using environmental education across different platforms. And I'd also like to introduce Dr. Sarah Haynes, who's professor of biology and science education at Towson University in Maryland. And she works with teacher preparation and also preparing non-formal educators. She's on the board of the Maryland Association for Environmental and Outdoor Education. And our second speaker today will be Dr. Pat Stevens-Williams, who's a professor of human dimensions in Arthur Temple College in the Arthur Temple College of Forestry and Agriculture. So, but we're gonna, if you have questions, you can either type them in the chat, or we're a small group. You can also unmute yourself and ask the question yourself. And with that, Sarah, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Elena. I'm going to share my screen. So the way I've decided to structure this is kind of start with where do I do this? So where am I integrating environmental education into the courses? What kind of courses are they? And then talk a little bit about the benefits of doing it. So why do I do it? What's the purpose of, just not maybe just teaching in lecture style? We were talking about that before the webinar started. And then finally, talk about how I do it. So you can get some ideas of how you might do it in your own classes. So where do I do it? We'll start with that. And I do it in biology courses. I'm a member of the biology department at Towson U, and the courses that I teach are mostly for pre-service teachers. So those that are preparing to be teachers, either elementary, middle, or high school. I have my hands in all three of those pots. One course that I teach is for people that are preparing to teach in non-formal settings. So like zoos, aquaria, nature centers, parks. And the last one listed there is kind of a blend. So the Bio 301 Field and Natural Science, that's for middle school majors. So people that are preparing to teach middle school. Middle school in Maryland is defined as grades 4 through 8. So I think that's a pretty wide range. So you could end up teaching in an elementary school, middle school. So anyway, those students take field and natural science, and the course is mainly taught outside on campus. I use the campus as the schoolyard. So what we're doing on campus, I try to tell the students, this is what you could do in your schoolyard at the place that you're going to be teaching at. And I'll give some more examples in a minute. The life science course 303 is for elementary education majors. And in that course, we cover plants, animals, and ecology. 304, that's for non-formal ed bound students. So we talk a lot about how non-formal educational institutions can partner with formal educational institutions to further environmental education and environmental literacy in K through 12 students in that course. And then finally, the Bio 382 is a study abroad course that's actually taught in Costa Rica each summer. And in that course, the main emphasis is on sustainability and environmental practices between the US and Costa Rica and how they differ. We visit a lot of farms, a coffee farm, a pineapple plantation normally, and we do participate in some action projects that I'll get to in a little bit. in those areas. And the emphasis is, hey, this is what you might be able to do with your students once you come back home. That course is kind of a blend of formal education students that want to be teachers, and also environmental science and biology students who are more interested in non-formal education. So I get a nice mixture of students in those courses. So that's the where. So benefits of doing it. And I have this moving road as kind of like they're on their road to their career, or road to being a teacher or a non-formal educator. What are the benefits to them or to me for structuring my classes this way? So Maryland is kind of in a special place right now because we have an environmental literacy graduation requirement, and there are also state environmental literacy standards. So for the formal educators, this is really important. They have to know how to teach outdoors, or else they're not going to be able to effectively implement the standards, and probably not going to make it so that their students are going to meet that graduation requirement very easily. So for my majors, education majors, it's really important that they know a little bit about environmental education and how to teach outdoors, because they're going to have to do it in their teaching careers. For the non-formal educators, it's more like partnerships. So to be brief, I could talk about this for another whole hour. We have meaningful watershed educational experiences. We abbreviate them MWEs in Maryland. And the meaningful watershed educational experiences are supposed to be integrated into the curriculum at least once at the elementary level, once in the middle school level, and once in the high school level. And part of the MWE experience is supposed to take place outdoors. So what normally happens is the K through 12 teacher will take their students to some non-formal environmental education organization, say a nature center, an aquarium, a zoo, a park, whatever it might be, and they'll do that outdoor component there on site. So for the non-formal educators, I cover more things like how could you partner with a K through 12 institution and help the teacher complete the MWE? What could your organization, the nature center that you're working at, do to help the teachers and to attract them and get them to visit your site? Because if the field trips and the programs and the activities you're offering at your non-formal educational site are not geared towards our state environmental literacy standards, or are not helping the teachers meet the graduation requirements and help their students achieve those standards, then they're not going to visit your organization. So with the non-formal education students, I kind of emphasize those points a little bit more. So we have the MWE. They're going to have experience with environmental education curricula that's widely used throughout the country. So in all those classes that I mentioned on the first slide, they all get trained in Project Wild. They also receive training in Project Learning Tree and Project Wet. In a couple of the courses, we cover WOW, the Wonders of Wetlands. We do some of the activities in class, and they're also responsible for leading some of the activities with their peers for practice. And the non-formal education course, they actually have to go out to a local nature center and lead activities there with students who are visiting there on field trips, or are signed up for educational experiences there. So they're going to get the experience teaching outdoors, which no matter which branch you're looking at, either the formal or the non-formal, they need that experience anyway. The formal teachers need it to meet the MWE requirements and the graduation requirements. And the non-formal, that's their whole career that they're choosing. So they have some experience before they graduate. Hopefully I'm improving their science literacy and their environmental literacy so that they have the content knowledge and the skills to pass those skills and content knowledge on to their students. And they're going to have the ability to apply these concepts as they relate to things that they have to teach anyway in formal classrooms or their non-formal educational organization. So it's really important, especially for the formal educators, that if they don't have the content in the background and have never heard of MWE until they get to the classroom, then they're kind of behind the 8 ball. So they are going to have to undergo more PD and things like that to kind of catch up. I've actually had students email me after they've gone into the classroom and say, hey, Dr. Haynes, I'm so glad that we covered all this in school, because now I'm faced with having to, one of them told me, I have to take my students out to a stream and we have to do water quality sampling. That's our school MWE. And now I already know how to do it. So they're just better prepared as soon as they enter the classroom. or get their first job in the non-formal sector. So that's kind of the why. And the how I do it, really briefly again. So in each of those courses, I have them organized as there's an ecology section, there's human impact, and there's pedagogy. So no matter what we're doing, I cover the science content, and I talk about how humans are impacting that, whatever the topic might be. Say it's the Chesapeake Bay watershed, because that's huge here. We talk about the ecology of the bay, what's happening now, what's wrong, what are the things that humans are impacting, and how can humans positively impact that to make it better. And then we come together and we say, okay, how can you teach that to the students that are coming to your non-formal institution, or how can you teach that to the students in your K through 12 classrooms so that they're meeting those ELIT standards? So there's an emphasis on the content knowledge first, and then applying that. I try to use EIC in all subject areas and teach the students how to do that. So EIC is the environment as an integrating context. So weaving the environment into all your subject areas, not just science. So how could you integrate a Chesapeake Bay watershed into a social studies lesson? How could you integrate language arts? Wet, Wild, and Learning Tree, I mentioned, they all, in every course, they receive training in all three of those curricula. MeWe writing, meaningful watershed educational experience. I focus on that for the courses for the formal education majors. Non-formals really aren't going to be writing a MeWe. In those classes, I talk more about how they can support the outdoor education component, the outdoor learning, and just making sure that the activities that they offer at their centers are aligned with the environmental literacy standards. And I also emphasize with them field trip planning. So I might offer them on a final exam, plan for me a field trip for fourth graders who are coming to your facility. They're going to be there for 4 hours, and your topic is this. What environmental education, environmental literacy standards might you cover in that field trip? How would you structure it? What would be your outdoor component? And then assessing learning. So how do you know that they learned? Even as a non-formal educator, it might be it's going to be a little less formal than a classroom teacher might do for an assessment, but you want to at least have some way to gauge that your students have learned something at your institution. So students have delivered programming at these different places over the years that I've been at Towson. I've taken them and had them at the Baltimore Zoo, where they've set up what the zoo calls education stations. So stations that we just have your typical table and maybe some artifacts set up, whether it be animal pelts or horns or antlers, or, you know, a display board, kind of like a science fair board that has 3 sides. And you might have some activity for students to do while they're standing there. The National Aquarium, that's the photo in the background there. I have students go there and they lead a program called What Lives in the Harbor. And it all takes place outside of the aquarium on the pier. And the students do things like measure pH, measure nitrogen levels, measure turbidity, and they come up with an idea of, okay, given these parameters, what might we actually find that is still living here? Which unfortunately isn't a lot, because the harbor water has a lot of pollution issues. I've had them deliver field trips and programming at a couple of local nature centers and at the outdoor school site for a local school system, Baltimore County Public Schools, where they've taken the students their stream sampling and they measured water quality and looked for macroinvertebrates, done some macroinvertebrate sampling. So that is it for me. That's my work in a nutshell. I'm going to leave it to Pat now.
Okay, that's thank you, Sarah. That was wonderful. It's a hard act to follow. I'm like, that's very cool, the types of things that you are doing. So once again, I'm Dr. Pat Stevens-Williams. I teach human dimensions overall in the College of Forestry and Agriculture. I've been here about 19 years now. we really push about the outreach and the communications and all of that in our program. Communications is one of the key accreditations that we have to meet for the Society of American Foresters. So that's our forestry accreditation. Our students are also eligible for wildlife certifications when they're done with the program here. So with part of this, oh, and I have to give my push for that we have an online master's program as well. That's for resource communications and interpretation. So with all of that, it's trying to bring all of these people together, these pre-service professionals, and give them opportunities and skill sets to be able to move forward. So the first with this is trying to understand who our students are, and I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully everything will work okay. All right, everybody see the screen? Did it come up okay? All right. All right, so being in the Arthur Temple College of Forestry and Agriculture, we're in what's known as the Piney Woods in East Texas. So obviously a lot of pine plantations here. It's very different than other parts of the country as far as harvesting and growth and all of that. For instance, north of 40, deciduous trees are the wonderful things, and pines are the weeds, and south of 40, the deciduous trees are the weeds. So, it's very much an industrial forestry area. It's just very different from some of the other parts of the country. So we're in East Texas, where the trees are here. Great parts of West Texas, that doesn't happen. The programs within our college are forestry, wildlife, geospatial, and environmental science. So we have a lot of different things in there. And then within that, we have urban forestry, fire, general forestry, human dimensions. Recreation is folded in there as well as interpretation. And we also have graduate programs, not only face-to-face, but the online programs. We're going into our 20th year of that. It's been wonderful training for our basically pre-professional students in that way. And so one of the things that you really have to understand about our students as pre-professional as well is the types of things that they're going to do. And it is quite a variety of what they might go out and do. They might be everything from working to zoos to, be policy makers in DC. So it's really quite a range. What I'm showing you here on the screen is some of our fish and wildlife people, as well as National Park Service people, working with children, teaching them about the areas that they would like to see protected and cared for. And meanwhile, we have the hardcore dirt foresters coming out of this program, and our wildlife students as well. We often refer to these as our hook and bullet kids. They have been interested in fishing and hunting mostly their entire lives. It's a very common cultural piece to their families in the area, and that come to this particular school. And so this is their love to be outdoors and to learn about the management pieces of it. A lot of them are very surprised at the science that goes in with it. They truly are. They think they're going to get to hunt and fish all the time, but they're learning all of this very difficult science. And one of the challenges with that then is, how do they communicate that to the public? Part of our programming and everything is that they usually have to do about 20% service. And so, it's how do we take this difficult science and technology and transfer it to the public, whether it's children, whether it's, senators, it doesn't matter. And a lot of the same skill sets go with that as far as communications go. Get it to move. We also do state and national parks. A lot of times, many of our students will end up in the administrative part. We actually have several, top park superintendents, both at the national and state level. Here we have Indiana Dunes and Addie Partridge, one of ours out at Glacier. So they're all over, they end up all over the country and all over the world doing different type things. Living history is one thing that some of them do. So we do have that interdisciplinary pieces where they have to learn about the historical, aspects and backgrounds as well. A lot of outreach with schools and children, both within the parks and within the school systems. You know, there's that typical piece that where some teachers in the school systems are uncomfortable handling some of this content, so they'll, you know, bring in an expert. And those are our people that, you know, our students are, you know, and former students that are going into those school areas and taking care of it. And then ultimately also we have game wardens and park police that are involved in this. So they're not only, you know, trying to take care of the police part of it, but also to be able to, you know, have people get along with them and to get along with people themselves. And we actually have several states that actually, when they hire, you know, a park police person, they also have to be an interpreter, you know, so they have to play both roles of educator as well as enforcer. And so using Project Wild has been really instrumental in helping them, you know, bridge that gap. We predominantly use Project Wild because so many of our students are wildlife students when they come in. And so, you know, in trying to get something that meets their needs and passion and interest, you know, it's been key to be able to do that. One of the last things too that I wanted to show you is some of the different ways that we can go in is, for instance, one of our students here, KK Langley, who works for the Forest Service, is also Alabama Coshada. And so she is using a lot of the Project Wild activities and everything in a tribal youth crew that they are putting together, not only within Texas, but she has 4 states that with the Forest Service that she's the liaison for. So Project Wild plays a big role in some of the things that she does as far as, you know, teaching these tribal crews as their youth and getting them, you know, to understand how some of the concepts work in, you know, environmental education, as well as, you know, an opportunity once again to get their skill sets going and, you know, and their sense of interest in something that they might not, you know, otherwise be knowledgeable about. Okay, so how does Project Wild really fit in? Other than the way these students use it in the future, the other thing to know is that most of our students are extreme introverts. So if you gave them the MBTI, you know, quiz, which we do, and you lined them up against a wall, that introversion is going to be packed. Whereas a very few will go out towards the middle line and maybe only 2 or 3 will pass over into that extrovert. Well, regardless of the fact that they're mostly introverts and that they got into this so that they would, if some of them, if possible, they would never see people. And yet, you know, it is instrumental for them to be able to work with people in all sorts of extreme situations. And to them, sometimes an extreme situation is handling 4-year-olds, you know, rather than somebody who is, you know, coaching or things like that. So they're both ends of that line of continuum of places where they might land, where the Project Wild skill sets might come into play. So we put Project Wild into the intro class. It's basically Intro to Recreation and Human Dimensions. And so it's, you know, that part where most people interact with natural resources at a recreation type, you know, base. Now, you know, certainly we know, you know, food, you know, shelter, all of those things come from other places, but where most people interact, where you can kind of get them, is in that recreation component as well. So we talk about, you know, recreation and working with people and schools and all of that. And then we also end up doing an end project that looks at, we use Yellowstone National Park as the baseline of that, where they actually have to, after they've gone through all of the steps with Project Wild, and they've done the activities and they've actually worked with their, you know, their colleagues doing the activities, then they have to come up with an entire media plan associated with, you know, different types of issues. For instance, with Yellowstone, we're looking at bison, geothermal, fire, you know, extreme tourism, what they term as Turons, you know, that are extreme tourists that do silly things, you know, trying to put their children on bison and stuff like that. And so they actually have to come up with, you know, these plans and utilize how they might use Project Wild in that as well. This introduces them to having to do outreach, and it introduces them in a way that makes them feel safe in doing it. Like I said, most of them are introverts. They're very comfortable within their own group of, you know, friends and colleagues, but you get them out of that and they're going to be the ones that are very very quiet and will not engage if they don't have to, and all of that. So what we talk about is using, these skill sets to put something in your back pocket. So if you get into situation number 36, you can pull out card number 36 and say, okay, hey, I have a Project Wild activity that'll work for, and so giving them opportunities to learn those things and become comfortable with their own skills and what they bring to the plate, and giving them opportunities to learn ways to connect. So some of the ways that we actually bring that culmination, besides the Yellowstone project, is that we have them work with outreach programs that we do, much like Dr. Haynes talked about, with the zoos and the local schools and that. We also require 20 service hours in the class. So that kind of gets them a little bit by the hook, that they have to participate in a set of them. We do provide lots of opportunities for them to do that, whether it's going out to doing workshops at, or activities at some of the local state parks, or historical places, that they'll go help with those places that are having basically field days type of things. So they'll satisfy their service hours that way. We also work with we are fortunate enough that we have a charter school right next to us. So we are able to have them work with the charter school. It works out great to be able to work with those pre-service teachers as well, so that they learn to kind of depend upon each other. And then, ultimately, as pre-service professionals, any place that we can get them involved in undergraduate research associated to outreach and understanding and working with the public, and any sort of human dimensions project that we possibly can have them work on, that it also brings in those Project Wild. They do get Project Learning Tree 2 years into their basically into their curriculum education. Our students are required to go on a 6-week field station during the summer between their sophomore and junior year. And so one of those weeks, we divided up by weeks: wildlife, human dimensions, etc. And so one of those weeks, on the human dimensions week, we also add in that Project Learning Tree flavor. But once again, Project Wild primarily because of the wildlife impact. And we do both Project Wild and Project Wild Aquatic, so that it hits both fronts that way. And with that, that's about it. I'd be glad to, Elena, if you want to segue us in.
Sure. Thank you both very much. Pat, I used to teach preschool, and sometimes 4-year-olds can be very scary. I can attest to that. So I did receive a message in the chat for Dr. Haynes. Sarah, you had mentioned, that students have contacted you when they're teaching to say thank you so much, because this is very applicable to what I'm doing now. I think one of the things as environmental education professionals, we hear a lot that teachers are just sometimes scared to take their students outdoors. It's so new, and they feel like they're going to lose control of the classroom. And so how do you address that with your students?
That's a really good question. I do devote a class session to management issues, and I have them actually read. There's a book that I use that I can't think of the author right now. I know that's not real helpful, but there's a book of case studies, and we read case studies of teachers. So it'll say, Elena is a 4th grade teacher and wants to take her students out, and she's afraid to because she's afraid she'll lose control, or in one of the case studies, the teacher is afraid that the child's going to run away, or things like that. And then we just talk it out. Okay, well, what are some things you can do to alleviate that, or try to prevent that from happening? Maybe you need to have extra people out there for the first time that you ever do that, or there's a myriad of things that could come up in a teacher's mind. Most of those things never happen, but that's how I handle it with the students. We read about case studies and we just talk it out. In fact, almost every time I do a wet, wild, or learning tree activity, also I'll finish up and I'll say, okay, what are some of the management issues that might happen with this activity? What are some ways that you could try to prevent be proactive and make sure that those things aren't going to happen. Because most of the time when I do the projects, Wet Wild and Learning Tree, I take the students outside. I think that a lot of the activities are just better done outside, and we're meant to be done outside. So we'll talk. Maybe you have to have boundaries and tell them you need to only collect your data or whatever you have the students doing between this tree and this tree. Or maybe you need to think about, be proactive and think about other ways that you could prevent some misbehavior, going over rules ahead of time, like birds and worms and Project Learning Tree. For those of you that might not be familiar with it, the students run around and they're looking for colored toothpicks or pipe cleaners that are supposed to be worms that may or may not be camouflaged in the substrate. So maybe you want to talk about, well, do you want them to run, or do they have to walk, or are they able to flap their wings like a bird? Like I have my students go cheep, cheep and run across. Maybe you need to have traffic cones. I use orange traffic cones a lot to set boundaries. This is your playing field. You're not supposed to go out of that. But I think a lot of it also just comes with experience. You're going to be nervous at first, and then once you do it a few times, and if you are proactive and you have your management strategies set, I think most of the time you're going to find that the kids aren't, they're not going to run down the street and run off the schoolyard and be gone.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yep.
And Pat, you had talked about the importance of not just teaching science, but communicating that science as well. I think as the scientific community as a whole has learned that lesson the hard way in terms of climate change. Like at first we tried to teach the science of climate change, and then we realized, hey, this is really complicated science. And all we're talking about is this doomsday experience, and it really shut off the public. So can you talk a little bit more about how students have reacted in terms of their comfort in communicating the science that they're learning?
Yes, their biggest challenge truly is to the sweaty palms and things like that. They're standing up there trying not to pass out while they're talking to people. Now they really do get comfortable and everything with it. But you're right with the communications piece with that. One of the things that I try to pass on to them, and I try to practice as well, is that we always end with two things. Number one, a sense of hope, so that we don't always do doom and gloom, and so that they understand the sciences and the different parts of it, and the potential. I mean, all of this stuff is potentially very scary. And then of course with psychology and everything, the human mind can only handle so much, particularly if you're, under the situation where you're, Maslow's pyramid, trying to put breakfast on the table and keep a roof over your head. By God, do I have to worry about climate change too? And so, it's trying to get them into a position to, number one, end with a sense of hope that this isn't a doomsday yet. And then second, something that they can do, whether it's a very small, simple thing like turn off the lights, to drive less. We're going to talk about, climate change type things, but one simple task that they can do. And so it brings them where we have that discussion in class, about some of these things, and it can get pretty dark. And then we'll be like, okay, what is the sense of hope here? And what are some things that we can positively do ourselves, and also give an opportunity for the people that we are talking to, depending upon age, situation, audience, etc. And, give them some ideas. And so, you can have that discussion. You can throw out one or two things that you might do, or somebody that you knew, had done those things, and then start the discussion from that way. Okay, so what's one thing that you can do? What might you tell them, that might be an idea that they can do? And so those things, it seem to, it doesn't totally alleviate it, but it gives them a way to manage those types of situations. What we see a lot is that they're afraid of getting it wrong. They're afraid of getting it into a situation where they feel they're too deep to be able to get out. And so, yet, it's not just the science part of the science, but the cultural part of the science as well, that they're afraid to get in deep with some of those things. And so ultimately, just reassuring them, giving them a chance to talk them out in class, maybe handle some of those issues that might be brought up when they're out in public, and giving them that sense of hope that they can manage it.
Thank you so much. Dr. Haynes and Dr. Stevens-Williams, I want to thank you for your time, and thanks to those of you that could join us today. I apologize. I know we went a little bit over. This meeting was recorded and we will post it to our YouTube channel, and I'll be sure to send out the link to everyone. So thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.